Welcome to another episode of Neowolf News. I'm your host, Neowolf. This is episode 2 of a 3-part series where I'm discussing the events of the 1862 Dakota conflict in Minnesota. And if you missed part 1, be sure to go back and watch that to get the setup to this story. In this episode, I'm going to talk about the events that happened during a 6-week period in August to September of 1862. And I'm also going to talk a little bit more about my experiences of traveling around to these sites and interpreting them during the summers of 2011 and 2012. So let's get right into this. As we now know, the Dakota people were left with a very small piece of land on the southern shore of the Minnesota River, and this was during the time of the Civil War. So their delivery of food and supplies was delayed because of the war. And so this was the middle of August in 1862, and the Dakota people were on the verge of starvation. So on August 17th, 4 young members of the tribe were returning from an unsuccessful hunt when they came across a white settler's farm, and they stole some eggs. And an argument broke out with the settlers, and it resulted in the killing of the 5 members of that family. And so they returned to their families and their tribe to tell them what had happened. They knew that a large number of Minnesota troops had just been sent to war, so that it would be a good time to attack. The chief of the Dakota people at the time was Chief Little Crow, who did not want to get engaged in any sort of war against the United States military. Little Crow said to his people that you will die like rabbits. When he could not convince them otherwise, he agreed to lead them into battle. So on August 18th, Little Crow led his people into battle, and one of the first places that they attacked was the Lower Sioux Agency, where one of the first people who was killed was Andrew Myrick. He was killed while trying to run away, and when they found his body, his mouth was stuffed full of grass. And also on this day, the Dakota warriors attacked several isolated farms and settlements in Renville and Brown counties, and more than 200 settlers were killed in these raids, and then more than 200 women and children and mixed-race civilians were taken hostage. Then, on August 19th, the news of the uprising reached St. Paul, and Governor Alexander Ramsey commissioned Henry Sibley to lead a force of volunteer state militia against the Dakota. Also that day was the First Battle of New Ulm, which was a small skirmish in which the city of New Ulm was able to defend itself. The next day, Charles Flandreau was elected as their military commander. Between August 20th and August 22nd, the Dakota made 2 attacks on Fort Ridgely, and they were turned back both times. Also during these dates, the Lake Chetek settlement was attacked, and the settlers were killed, and some were taken hostage. And then also on these dates, there was an attack on West Lake, which is now Munson Lake, where some settlers were also killed. Then on August 23rd was the Second Battle of New Ulm, and this one brought 600 Dakota soldiers, and this was the largest battle over a U.S. city since 1776. So then on August 25th, Charles Flandreau led the evacuation of New Ulm, leaving much of the city in ashes to head toward Mankato. Little Crow's camp retreated to the Upper Sioux Agency. At the Upper Sioux Agency, men form a soldiers' lodge to oppose the war and start the Dakota Peace Party. Then on August 25th, missionaries fleeing from the vicinity of the Upper Agency reach Henderson safely. On August 28th, Henry Sibley and his forces reached Fort Ridgely, where refugees had been under siege for 10 days. Then on September 2nd, a burial party was sent out by Sibley, and they were attacked at Birch Coulee, which is now a county park near Morton, Minnesota, where you can experience the interpretive site. And around this time is when the Peace Party opened negotiations with Sibley. Between September 3rd and 4th, a force led by Little Crow attacked Acton, Forest City, and Hutchinson. And also during this time, Fort Abercrombie is attacked and surrounded. Sibley learns that there are more than 250 hostages, and he begins negotiations for their release. On September 18th, Sibley's forces leave Fort Ridgely and advance up the Minnesota River Valley. And then on September 23rd, Sibley and his forces defeat Little Crow and the Dakota at Wood Lake near the Yellow Medicine River. On September 23rd, relief forces sent from Fort Snelling reached Fort Abercrombie, and then on September 24th, Little Crow and his forces fled westward. And then by September 26th, the Dakota Peace Party finally released the hostages at Camp Release. And by the end of the conflict that happened over that 6-week period, over 500 settlers had lost their lives, along with about 150 Dakota warriors. And so, like I said, I had started to travel around to these various sites in 2011, and it was in 2012 when I was visiting the sites that I had realized that it was an even year since that 1862 date. And when I did the math, I realized that it was exactly the 150-year anniversary of the Dakota Uprising. And so in August of 2012, I was visiting my friends in Pipestone over the anniversary of the harmonic convergence, which was August 16th and 17th. This was the 25th anniversary of the 1987 harmonic convergence. So I wanted to visit Pipestone and work on carving my very first pipe. And I got invited to attend a presentation at the Pipestone National Monument where some state representatives and members of the Dakota tribe were speaking about the events that happened in 1862 and that they were talking about reconciliation for our past. So this concludes this part of the story, and if you like content like this, be sure to follow us on social media. I'm at Neil Wolf News on Brighteon, BitChute, Rumble, and YouTube, as well as Gab, Twitter, Facebook, and Parler, now that Parler's back. Thanks for tuning into this episode, and we'll see you again soon.